Now, recently, Jeb Bush released his tax plan, and of course, no surprise, it's going to massively benefit rich people. Now, what would it do? Well, NPR kind of broke it down into some of the main points of what it's going to aim to do. Now, what it would do is that it would lower the effective tax rate of those earning about $10 million or more from 26% to about 21%. So already, tax break for very, very rich people, people making $10 million or more, as if they need a tax cut. All right, what else? Corporations. Guess what? Corporations would also see a tax cut from 35% to 20%. Huh. Yes, cutting corporate taxes. That's Jeb Bush for you. Okay. Now, what it would also do is that it would reduce progressive taxation. It would actually flatten it out to about 3 different brackets. These brackets would range from 10 to 25 to 28%. So there you go. People who are most low income, 10%. Higher up, 25%. The highest, 28%. It would also cap the total value of tax deductions like the mortgage, interest, or medical deduction at 2% of a filer's adjusted gross income. All right. It would nearly double the size of a standard deduction, and it would double the earned income tax credit for childless workers. So, hey, look at that. Poor people, they're throwing you a bone here. Jeb's throwing you a bone. Now, it would eliminate the carried interest loophole, which allows some hedge fund managers to claim their income as capital gains. So, you know, there's sort of something to kind of hit the hedge fund guys a little bit, but not too much. But basically what this does is that it is a huge giveaway to rich people with a couple of crumbs for the poor, and basically it ends up being more trickle-down bullshit. Now, this doesn't even get into the effect of what it would have on government spending, for example. Now, according to the conservative-leaning Tax Foundation, the Jeb tax cuts would reduce overall revenue by at least $3.6 trillion over the next decade, and that the richest top 1% of earners, filers making at least $406,000 per year, would see their incomes increase by another 11.5%. By contrast, how would the middle class do? Well, the middle class earners would only see their incomes increase by about less than 3%. Now, Jeb Bush claims that everything would work out. What do you mean? You lower taxes on the wealthy, and we're going to suddenly have growth. He says that everything would work out because we would have a 4% growth rate. Magical, mystical growth rate. You know, there was a name for that, and it was called voodoo economics. Now, the thing about voodoo economics is that it doesn't work, that it hasn't worked, and that it won't work. Conservatives are just convinced that if we just lower taxes even more for rich people, that it will all trickle down. Well, we're getting trickled down on, all right, all over our fucking heads. Some people might be into that, but seriously, that's not good tax policy. Okay. Now there's your substance. Now let's get into some of the criticism of the tax plan, and this comes from Chris Wallace. Now Jeb is going to talk about his tax plan on Fox News Sunday with Chris Wallace, and well, it doesn't go well. Let's take a look at some of that. And by the way, it's a long clip. It's about 2 minutes long, but I want you to watch this.
There are 2 major criticisms of your tax plan so far. First of all, the argument that, and you gave your tax plan to 4 conservative economists who said that it would increase the deficit between $1 and $3 trillion over the next 10 years. Now, Ronald Reagan proposed something roughly similar, big tax cuts back in 1980, and he argued that the dynamic effect, the word you used, would be that the growth would end up paying for the revenue loss. You know what your dad called that. Is this your version of voodoo economics?
No, look, the dynamic effect of tax policy that creates economic growth narrows the deficit that you're describing. But first of all, it's not the government's money. It's people's money, and if we can allow people to have more money, clearly that's going to create economic growth. But we're also going to have to fix the regulatory mess in Washington, D.C., embrace the energy revolution in our midst, and have a commitment to reduce the growth of spending, which ultimately means we have to preserve and protect entitlements for those that have it, but fix it going over the long haul.
But whether it was Ronald Reagan's tax cuts or your brother's tax cuts, they did add greatly to the deficit.
They didn't add as greatly as the static thinkers on the left think. They created a dynamic effect of high growth. And that's what we need. If we think that if people think 2% growth is okay, then we'll have more people living in poverty, and disposable income for the middle class will continue to decline. We have to jumpstart the economy so that people can have more money to make decisions for themselves.
Then there's another complaint, and that is the issue of who benefits. The Tax Foundation says the middle class would see after-tax income increase 2.9%, but the top 1% would get a boost of 11.6%. An analysis of your tax returns the last 6 years, which you have released to the public, the last 6 years indicates that you would save under your tax plan $3 million. Does Jeb Bush need a $3 million tax cut?
The answer to that is fuck no. Jeb Bush does not need another $3 million tax cut. Now, okay, so there's a lot that's wrong in this. And there's a lot of points that I'm going to cover. And I'm going to go through, I'm going to start covering some of these points because I think some of this bullshit needs to be reviewed. All right. So he said that they created these tax cuts, created a dynamic effect of high growth during the Bush years. And that's what we need. No. It actually didn't. If you look at the effect of the Bush tax cuts, what it really did is that it increased the deficit. That's what it did. It created a huge budget hole. And of course, it just ended up making rich people richer. Dynamic? Yeah, not so much. Now, he also addressed the static thinkers on the left. Really, static thinkers, at least liberal economic policies seem to work for more than just the 1%. I'm just saying. Trickle-down economics has been nothing but a boondoggle for the middle class and the poor. We have been fucked. Simple as that. Okay. Now, as I said, a dynamic effect, right? I love, once again, he goes back to the dynamic effect, which, you know, Reagan said the same thing. It didn't work. Reaganomics didn't work. And that's why, see, what happened in Reaganomics is that all the money went to the top. And that's why he points out that 40% of all of all the taxes are paid by the 1%. That's because they have all the fucking money. They have all the money. Yeah, of course they're going to pay the taxes. They have all the money. That's kind of a no-brainer. All right. Now, my point on that, right, of why these policies are terrible is that, look, people don't want to pay more taxes. I think that's pretty obvious. They especially don't want to pay more taxes so that a rich person could get away with paying less. And that's what these policies lead to. These are regressive policies. These are policies that make sure that rich people pay a lower rate, and that shifts the burden of taxes out of the poor and the middle class. That is a redistribution of wealth, only that redistributes up to the top. That's what they're all about. That's what the lobbyists pay for. That's who owns Jeb Bush. Jeb Bush is out there creating a tax plan, which is almost similar to most of the Republican candidates, where it would do nothing but redistribute money to the top from the poor and the middle class. That's it. That's the whole plan, to capture more of America's wealth and send it up top. That is not what we need. If that is dynamic, if that's what you call dynamic, then I don't want any part of it. All right. Now, finally, when it comes to raising taxes on the rich, and this probably has something to do with how Republicans seem to not win the presidency very often and how badly Jeb Bush is doing. Now, people overwhelmingly want to raise taxes on the rich. I've got a couple of polls here. Now, according to a CBS New York Times poll done in May, When asked, do you favor or oppose raising taxes on people earning more than $1 million a year? Seems rather straightforward, right? 68% of Americans say yes, tax the rich. Let's tax the rich. Another poll. ABC News Washington Post poll done back in January of this year. Overall, do you think large business corporations pay their fair share in taxes, pay too little, or pay too much? You know how many Americans said, well, we think corporations don't pay enough? 65%. A majority of Americans across party lines say that corporations and the rich do not pay their fair share of taxes. So why is Jeb Bush out there pushing a tax plan that does the complete opposite, that gives rich and corporations a giant tax cut? It's because his donors tell him to. It's because that's their static idea that they want to do. They want to say that liberals or that we're static thinkers on the left. Well, at least our older policies seem to actually fucking work. Which theirs, on and on, over and over again, study after study, shows that trickle-down economics doesn't do anything but bankrupt the poor and the middle class to give to the rich. And it bankrupts the country in the process. And here's Jeb Bush trying to do the same old, tired, debunked bullshit again.